You're listening to a podcast from the BBC World Service. This is Hardtalk with me, Stephen Sacker. Thanks for downloading this edition of the programme. I do hope you enjoy it. Welcome to Hardtalk on the BBC World Service with me, Stephen Sacker. My guest today provides a rare glimpse into a secret world. His story raises questions about the nature of 21st century warfare. Bryant joined the US Air Force straight from college. He was picked to join the secretive Joint Special Operations Command and trained to operate one of the United States' most controversial and important military programs, the deployment of armed, unmanned aerial vehicles, drones, to hunt down and kill some of America's most dangerous enemies. For the best part of 6 years, Bryant worked in high-tech military bunkers in Nevada and New Mexico, using computer screens and digital technology to operate drones over hostile territory thousands of miles away in Afghanistan, Iraq, Pakistan and Yemen. He was indirectly involved in the killing of more than 1,500 people. He was very intimately involved with the targeted killing of at least 13. In 2011, he quit the Air Force, feeling deeply uncomfortable. And since, he's spoken publicly about his experiences and become what he calls an informer in the campaign against drone warfare. He's a man who's been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress. He is haunted and angry. But in the physical sense, he's never once been on a battlefield. So what happened to Bryant? Well, he joins me now. Welcome to Hardtalk.
Thank you for having me.
You have chosen to go public to speak out about one of the United States' most secretive military programs of recent years, and some have called you a traitor. So explain to me why you are here in this studio.
I'm here to hold my country and the people that I knew accountable for their actions, and myself, really. This is something that we can't keep secret any longer, simply for the fact that what our actions do actually creates a bigger problem. And so we need to find a way to rectify it rather than just continue killing people indiscriminately.
And we are going to go through your career from beginning to end, but just one big point that comes out of your first answer. You felt, did you, during your time of service in the drones campaign, you felt a fundamental lack of accountability, did you?
Very much so. I actually reported 3 incidences to the Inspector General's office, and none of them, I don't know if any of them took hold, and I was never contacted about any of them. No one wants to hear you complaining. There are people overseas that are on the ground doing this job, fighting a war, and you're in Vegas living a cushy life.
Right. Well, people are going to hear you today, so let's go through this from beginning to end. Right, you joined up, you became an airman straight out of college.
I actually had only a year of college.
Yeah, but the point is you ended up in uniform, and it seems to me an interesting choice, because you've said since that you never intended or joined up to kill people. Of course, militaries do tend to get involved in killing people, so that raises a question. What was it, do you believe, that the Air Force saw in you that made them believe you could be a useful asset for them?
I scored a 92 on my ASVAB test out of 98.
Now, what does that prove?
So that's just like the aptitude test. It's what jobs that you're available to do. Mental skills, verbal skills, mathematics, linguistics. They give you this test, and then they rate you. Average is about 50 or less, 45 maybe. And I scored a 92.
Right, so they saw you as highly intelligent, and as a result of that, you ended up being trained to be, I think what the term was, a sensor operator.
Yes.
But you're going to have to explain to me what a sensor operator does.
So a sensor operator is kind of like a co-pilot without the ability to pilot the aircraft. We back up the pilot on everything that he does. Engine parameters, airspeed, but he also backs us up because we're controlling the camera on the ball. You're
in charge of the surveillance that this drone is doing?
I'm in charge of the camera. There's someone directing the surveillance, but I'm in charge of the camera. So my job is to give them the best picture possible while still backing up the pilot. And
just to be clear, you are doing this, and in your career, you were doing it in sort of high-tech military bunkers in Nevada, for a very short time in Iraq itself, and then for some time in New Mexico. So you are thousands and thousands of miles from the theater of operation.
About 10,000 miles, yeah. And then as for sensor operators, all their job is during the firing of a missile. It's a two-trigger system. I have to be firing the laser for the pilot to be able to fire the missile. So I fire the laser at the target. Target gets lased or sparkled or whatever you want to call it. So you laser the target, and then the pilot, 3-2-1 rifle, pulls the trigger, and then we guide the missile to target.
I just wonder, when you were going through the training, and you're this highly intelligent guy who's been, you know, in a sense, cherry-picked for this particular secretive mission, did you feel, as you were being trained, that, hey, this is fun, this is like sort of gaming, this is like the sort of video games that I play at home? Not
necessarily. That was actually probably the biggest thing. Doing the drone program has destroyed my ability to play video games, actually. I don't enjoy them anymore. But was there any sort of any comparison to be drawn between the sorts of experiences you have on a game console and the sorts of things that you were then trained to do as a military man operating a lethally armed drone? The ability, the hand-eye coordination, and the ability to monitor multiple different things that's going on a screen actually helped. There's 14 total monitors in a ground control station which we fly out of. So, like, it's that multitasking ability of being able to take multiple data points of information and coalesce them into one thing actually helps a lot. Right.
Now, we are talking a period where you served in this drones operation from roughly 2006 to 2011. Mm-hmm. And you are involved in extremely sensitive military operations in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Yemen, all over the place. Let's go through some of the issues and real-time situations you had to deal with. I mean, starting on day one. You're operating a drone in Iraq, and you're supposed to be sort of offering surveillance protection.
Convoy escort.
Yeah. You see on your camera, on the drone, even though you're sitting in the United States, you see what looks like potentially an IED, a roadside bomb. Yeah. The convoy is approaching. You try to alert your superiors to what you've seen with the drone camera, but it doesn't work. The convoy continues to travel, and ultimately...
So when that happened, I think everyone was in a panic, and no one could get in contact with this convoy, and when we tried to transmit to these people, the jammers that they had on blocked the signal from getting in. And the reason why they have these jammers is to block radio signals from IEDs around them, so that when they go over an IED that's radio triggered, the signal doesn't go through, and so it doesn't trigger.
And ironically, that meant that they carried on, the bomb went off, and I think 2 servicemen were killed, 3 badly wounded. And you watched all this on camera unfold in front of your eyes.
Actually, I don't know the names of the 3 survivors, but I feel responsible for that. I felt like my job was to make sure people got home safe, and I failed. So my career started off as my first day on the job was as a failure. And even though people said that it's not your fault, you did the best that you could, that was still what I believed intrinsically what my job was to make sure people came home safe.
That case on day one was about force protection, but you were intimately involved in the killing of more than a dozen individuals in Afghanistan and Iraq. Let's talk about one in Afghanistan. It involved a high-value target who you'd been told to watch. He was in a particular building. The decision was taken to strike. Now, as that decision was being taken, you saw what you believed to be a figure come out of that building. Just explain to me what happened.
So this particular shot happened when I was coming onto shift. So all the information that I was given, or my crew was given, we were given by the previous crew. So we're told, you're going to take a shot. This is a building, 2 men are in it, that's it. So when we fired the shot, it was like an L-shaped building, and the person ran from off the screen around into the door, and it was a person. Like, I'm not going to say that it was a dog. I was told that it was a dog, but it was a person running from off the screen around and into the building.
But could it have been the high-value target?
No. It was too small to be a male adult.
You suggesting to me it was a child?
Yes. I believe it was a child.
So you see this on the big close-up on your screen. Do you at that moment have the capacity, the ability within the system to divert the missile which has already been launched?
If there was more time, probably, but there was less than 6 seconds left on the clock.
So what did you do?
Maintain target. Like, I asked the pilot what that was, and he's like, it don't matter. They didn't care. They didn't care at all. There was no sense of compassion or caring or understanding. It was, oh, that's a tragedy. We'll just cover it up. I don't think at the time I was able to think. I was so shocked. It wasn't until I just asked, what was that? And it wasn't until afterwards, after the missile hit, I was like, did we just kill a kid? You know, the shock. There's no recoil. There's no anything to say that we've done a shot. It's just click, click, click.
We began this interview talking about that word accountability. I just wonder, after an incident like this, where, you know, the unexpected happens, the pull trigger signal is given, the missile goes off, and then you, responsible for the cameras, see what you believe to be a child right on target. What sort of post-strike investigation, accountability is there?
None. Really none. The only time that people got investigated was if they crashed an aircraft that I know of directly. Though there are incidences, you know, that have been reported where friendlies have been killed or civilians have been targeted. But those are, I mean, look at, they're flying thousands of missions per month, and only how many few have been reported as actually being civilian casualties or, and the only reason those are reported is because there's unquestioning evidence from outside sources that say we did something bad. And the more information that comes out with the journalists going to these locations and reporting on drone strikes and people, local people reporting on the drone strikes, we're getting a bigger
This is the
picture.
point, a very germane point. I mean, the Bureau of Investigative Journalism in the US and other independent bodies have assessed that a couple of thousand, at least, civilians across the piece may have been killed in drone strikes since the program began, and in Pakistan the figure ranges from anything like 400 to 900, depending on how you interpret the statistic.
But I'm pretty sure that most people who are in the job don't even know that.
But my point is that you're saying, actually, some of the civilian deaths were deliberately and consciously covered up. But what proof do you have?
My experience, what I've seen, I didn't take secret information. I didn't take any of this stuff. In fact, when that happened and I told my supervisor at the time, he just said, doesn't matter. Just leave it alone. Don't bring it up again, or else you'll get in trouble.
Let me talk about a different aspect of the emotion that this brought out of you. You, again, because you're in charge of the cameras, you see everything, both before a strike and after a strike. Now, in other situations in Afghanistan, you saw that the guys you were hitting were indeed militants. You could tell from the fact they had arms, from the way they were behaving, they were Taliban. I'm just wondering what impact it had upon you when the strike went in, and I think there was one occasion where I think 3 men were hit by one of your missile strikes. And I know in this case 2 died immediately, 1 did not, and you watched what happened next. Just describe for me the emotions you're feeling if you're in the United States, in your bunker, and you're watching what happens unfold. What's it like?
Sickening. I watched a man bleed out in infrared. I watched his blood squirt out of his leg, hit the cold ground. It was January in the mountains of Afghanistan, and I watched the blood hit the ground and then cool. And then I watched his body. We watched this guy until he turned the same color as the ground that he died on.
But I guess my reaction to that is horror that you saw it, and obviously compassion for any individual who's dying. But my thought is, you're a soldier. You're in a war. Throughout the history of human conflict, those who are combatants witness the most terrible things. So what is so special or different about a drone operator such as yourself having to see the consequences of fighting a war?
Because this type of warfare is the most cowardly type of warfare that there has ever been created. And in that moment, that was my first shot that you just mentioned, I felt like a coward. I felt like the worst coward. I'd betrayed my beliefs. I'd betrayed everything that had ever been built up.
But you had defended your nation.
But see, even that first shot, I don't believe that they were insurgents. Just because they were carrying weapons, they never fired at anyone. They were 3 men walking down a road. And I believe that it is my duty as a warrior to give men an opportunity to not do harm to another person. And these men were not doing harm to anyone that I had seen, that anyone had seen, and we killed them anyway simply for the fact that they had weapons.
You, as one of your key missions before you left the military, were tasked with joining the hunt for Anwar al-Awlaki, one of the leaders of al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, hiding out in Yemen. You have since said that you feel that you were being asked to betray the US Constitution and the US public by getting involved in that hunt, which of course after you left ended with his assassination in a drone strike. I would put it to you that Anwar al-Awlaki, with his record, a man who preached to 2 of the 9/11 terrorists, a man who was ideologically committed to the war against the United States, who had involvement with other people who attacked US targets, including a man who killed 13 at Fort Hood. He was, according to any standard, an immediate, direct, and real threat to the United States.
But he's also a citizen of the United States. And according to our Constitution, it says that even a traitor to the United States, specifically mentions traitors, it says even a traitor to the United States deserves a fair and free trial in front of a jury of his peers. If you look at Anwar al-Awlaki's history, you'll see that he was actually one of the biggest proponents of peace when he was in the States. He even had lunch at the White House or Pentagon or whatever. Like, he was highly involved in very high
I think when you start
stuff.
saying this sort of thing, this is where you part company with many, perhaps, sympathetic people in the United States who listen to some of your arguments and maybe see some merit in them. But when you start to tell me that Anwar al-Awlaki can be seen as a man of peace, you just lose them.
He didn't become one, but he started off as one. That's the real tragedy. If you look at what we have done to countries around the world, this man had every right to be angry. We were killing people in his country.
See, Barack Obama, who came to power committed to ending America's military involvements in Afghanistan and Iraq, he's gone through this case very patiently with the American people. He said, look, we consulted with the Department of Justice, we informed the Congress before this strike was done, because he was a US citizen, and we recognized the very special conditions that came with that. But in the end, this man was a real and present danger to the United States. He was a direct security threat, and it was legitimate for us to take him out in the way we did.
I think that the United States can make up any excuse that they want, but doesn't change the fact that they killed a human being who was an American citizen, which should be their first priority to protect. Their first answer to any threat shouldn't be to kill. We are supposed to be the biggest and best country in the world, and if we cannot live up to our standards, then we do not deserve to be that.
Look at the conditions that Obama set out. After a degree of criticism of the use he had made of drone strikes, more, it should be said, substantially more than George W. Bush ever did, Obama in 2013 made a major speech, and he said, look, I want to be clear now about how we do these drone strikes. He said that they're only authorized at the very highest levels under certain conditions. Authorized when there is a continuing imminent threat to US citizens, there must be a near certainty that the terror target is present and that civilians are not present, and he said there must be no alternative that is viable or realistic. Do you accept that those conditions have changed the reality since you left the military, and far fewer civilians have been killed since?
It doesn't seem so, not with the reports that I've read. And I would also like to point out that justifying something like that gets a lot easier every time that you do it. Because when you cross a boundary, you're more likely to cross another boundary. And that's what I see with my government and with people that are in charge of this type of technology, is they just justify the use of it. There's no real reason to continue progressing warfare in this type of way without trying to find a diplomatic solution.
Surely the justification, and this is, I think, what the American people believe, according to the opinion polls done by Pew Research and others, the justification is that the United States, with its drones, has severely degraded the capacity of al-Qaeda and the Taliban in Afghanistan/Pakistan to conduct operations. They have taken out a whole cadre of leaders. You could say the same of Al-Shabaab in Somalia and some key leaders of Al-Qaeda in Yemen.
How many times have these people died? I know there's at least one guy who has died at least 7 times because they say that they get him in a strike and then they've realized that they killed the wrong person.
Do you have any alternative? Given that we are talking about states where centralized authority has broken down, violent and unstable nations like Somalia, like Yemen, do you have any alternative proposal for how America can deal with these individuals who threaten, who believe they are at war with the United States?
Find a diplomatic solution. Be the bigger person and try to do peace talks. Public peace talks.
Try to do peace talks.
Public peace talks, yeah.
And you think that is a viable alternative that the American people would accept?
I would hope so, because at what price have we been progressing this war? How many millions of people have we killed compared to the thousands of people that we have had killed?
You are very angry, aren't you?
I am very angry.
Is it partly because you feel damaged? I mean, do you feel a very changed individual as a result of what you've been through over the last 7, 8 years?
Yeah, of course. I lost my innocence. I lost the person that I wanted to be. I no longer dream. I no longer am able to see myself having a very comfortable or enjoyable future. I see my life as a struggle.
See, the weird thing is, you say all this to me and you talk about the damage done to yourself. You have never been anywhere near a real battlefield. Admittedly, you were in Iraq for a few months, but you've never seen war from the point of view of an active battlefield. You've just been looking at video screens.
Yeah, but it still takes, you know, the results of your actions, and it takes a psychological and spiritual toll, especially when those beliefs that you very much held to a very high standard have been betrayed by the very people that you work for.
You've talked of your admiration for Chelsea Manning, for Edward Snowden. Mm-hmm. Many in the United States see both of those individuals as people who have betrayed their own country and betrayed America's national security interest. Do you think that you deserve to sit alongside them?
No, those guys are heroes. I was a coward. I was a coward. I sat in a bunker 10,000 miles away and killed 13 people with no real consequence for myself. Physical consequence, I guess.
A final brief thought, because we're almost out of time. If you had your time over again, would you choose never to have signed up to take part in the drone program, or would you actually still take the decision to be involved because you then could be in a position, as you put it, to be an informer to the American public about what is really going on? If you had the time over, which would you choose to do?
I would stay in. I would redo it all over again. All the pain and all the heartache and all that bad stuff that I've experienced, I would experience it all over again because I know that I did the right thing.
All right. Brandon Bryant, we have to end there, but thank you very much
for
being on Hard Talk.
That was an edition of Hard Talk presented by me, Stephen Sacker. For details of our complete range of podcasts and our terms of use, go to bbcworldservice.com/podcasts.